everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nerdy Movie News Roundup, the show where we round up all of the latest news in the world of nerdy movies. I'm teetering on the point of me getting sick. I was definitely around sick people for the past couple of days, so I'm feeling like a little bit of lightheadedness. I can feel it creeping in, but whenever I feel like I'm starting to get sick, I just steel myself and I tell my body, it's a mind thing. I'm like, you will not get sick. So we're just not going to get sick. We're just going to keep going. Let's get into our first story of the day. So apparently the Arkham show by Matt Reeves is going to be set in the DCU and not in his The Batman verse. So let's start reading these thread posts here. So somebody asked James Gunn, "Sir, could you tell me if Matt is producing another Batverse project other than the Batman 2, Penguin, and Arkham?" And then James Gunn responded saying, "Right now, Matt is producing Arkham as a DCU series, so there's just the two for now." And then somebody else asked him, at James Gunn, "Sorry, is the Arkham show set in the DCU?" And then James Gunn responded, "Yes, we love Matt as a director and producer, so he'll be producing stories both within the Batman universe and within the DCU." So yeah, very interesting. So, I am, or I should say, this actually gets me more interested in the Arkham show, because the thing about the Batman and the universe that is now going to spin out of it is that it is very dark and gritty and grounded. And when I think of what an Arkham show could look like in that universe, it's actually not as interesting as an Arkham show could be, I feel like. Because it's like, okay, so we're going to get a show about a bunch of mentally ill people. When Batman's villains are so fantastical and larger than life, it's like a spin-off show of the Penguin makes sense, because a mob show, almost like a Sopranos-esque show starring Colin Farrell's Penguin, that makes sense. Telling a crime drama in the world of Matt Reeves' The Batman, that seems intriguing. Going to the Arkham Asylum in the Matt Reeves universe, and it's just a bunch of psychopaths, it's like, okay, maybe that could be interesting, but not. But an Arkham show could be more. So setting an Arkham show in the DCU, I think, will allow for that show to be a lot more fantastical, a lot more larger than life, where it's like, if Killer Croc is in it, it'll be like a 10-foot tall crocodile man, and not just a guy with a skin condition, which is what I assume it would be if Killer Croc showed up in the Batman universe. So I don't know. An Arkham show in the DCU is just inherently more interesting to me, and it'll be interesting to see if this comes out before the Batman movie, or if this is now, in essence, kind of delaying this show, because it wants to wait until the Brave and the Bold comes out before Batman is established in this DCU, or maybe it comes out before then and it kind of sets up that movie. I don't know. We'll see, but very cool to see that Matt Reeves is doing stuff for both the DCU and the Batman. Because it's not that drastic of a thing, because he's also a producer on the Cape Crusader, which is the animated Batman show that's going to be going to Amazon Prime. So it's not like he didn't have his greasy little fingers in a bunch of other pots. Anyways, but yeah, we'll see what happens with that show. All right, we got some Jonathan Majors news. He has indeed been charged, and he has been charged, or I should specify. I'll just read the Hollywood Reporter article before summarizing it. Jonathan Majors is out at Marvel Studios. On December 18th, a Manhattan jury found Majors guilty of reckless assault in the third degree and guilty of harassment. In November, Marvel hired Michael Waldron to work on a new draft of what was once called Kang Dynasty, but is now being referred to as Avengers 5, according to sources. So, just to be clear, with him being charged with reckless assault and harassment, this is from what I understand. I'm not a lawyer, so take whatever I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Basically, what that means is that the jury found that he did indeed assault his girlfriend, but he didn't do it with malicious intent. So he technically got the least damning charges of what he was being charged with. But, I mean, it's still assault. And he was found guilty. And in my opinion, like I talked about last week, those text messages that came out are incredibly damning, and I think it would have been reasonable for Marvel to fire him anyways, just based off of those text messages where he's essentially trying to manipulate his girlfriend into not seeking medical attention after she was hurt. Right? Whether she was hurt by Majors or whether it was self-defense, whatever the case was, Jonathan Majors tried to manipulate his girlfriend into not seeking medical attention because he feared it would tarnish his reputation. Dude's a scumbag. And I think it would be, I think whatever the jury decided, just based on the evidence that we got, I think it would have been reasonable for Marvel to fire him. But he was found guilty and Marvel fired him, so that's where we're at. And I think the other interesting thing in that Hollywood Reporter article is also just that Avengers 5 is no longer being referred to as the Kang Dynasty in Marvel Studios, so it's also seeming likely that Kang as a whole might end up getting dropped, right? It's not where we won't even see Kang be recast. Marvel might actually just do away with the character altogether, and this is something that I've talked about in the past where, you know, when we were discussing, is Marvel going to drop Jonathan Majors or not? I've been kind of saying that with the end of Loki season 2, they have actually like the opportunity to do whatever they want, really. Like, they're not actually tied into Kang, because at the end of Loki season 2, the Kang threat is taken care of. You know, the TVA is its own organization, not really under Kang's control. At the end of Loki season 2, the TVA is keeping the Kang threat in check. They literally don't ever have to bring up Kang again, and it really wouldn't even feel all that weird. So I think that they probably will. This is just my prediction. I think they probably will abandon the idea of Kang being the next Thanos, because they've already introduced him, and audiences have not become attached to him the same way that they did Thanos, right? Like, he showed up in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and nobody really cared. And while Kang was good in like the end of Loki season 2, he just showed up at the end of the season and didn't leave the impression of, oh, this is the next Kang. It was more so the impression of, okay, that was interesting. We'll see what the other Kang variants are like. And they kind of just messed it up with Quantumania. And honestly, the whole multiverse thing in general is just not working as a whole. So they need to do something. So I don't know. Like, will I be shocked if we see a recasted Kang? No, but I think at this point it would honestly behoove them to. I get it. You're gonna make your Secret Wars movie, and it's gonna be a clusterfuck of cameos and nostalgia bait. And honestly, after No Way Home, it very well might make them a bunch of money. But I think you do that one thing, and then you move away from the multiverse. Just get back to just good stories. Like, whether you move on to X-Men and Fantastic Four as your main players, I just think you got to move away from the multiverse. I think it's just too much. And I mean, I will say as well, at the end of the day, like, you could also just tell good multiversal stories, but I just think the multiverse in general is just too convoluted. And I think that would be wise to move away from it. But I should stress that the important thing is to just make good movies. And it's like, you could make good multiversal movies, but I do think that there is an element of convolutedness that comes with the multiverse. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Jonathan Majors, fuck that guy, am I right? Let's move on. Superman Legacy is apparently not going to use the volume. This is coming from James Gunn on Threads. So somebody asked him, James Gunn, with the use of practical sets, would you use, or would you also use the volume for Superman Legacy, or are the sets too big for that? James Gunn responds saying, the sets are too big and my cameras move too much. So I think the volume is something that gets hated on a little too much because at the end of the day, it is a tool, right? Like, it's a tool that can be utilized well. It's a tool that can be utilized poorly, right? Like, you can make a good set and you can make a bad set. But I do think it is cool that James Gunn is looking at the tool and being like, hey, that's not really going to work for what I want to do. So I'm not going to use it. And because I think that's the main problem as far as why the volume has the reputation that it has, is because it seems like these studios are just using it because they can and because it's easier. So like in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, probably would have behooved them to make some sets in order to make that world feel lived in. Same goes for a bunch of Marvel shows and films and then not just Marvel shows but big studio projects. So I think James Gunn is honestly, like with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, like that movie looks so much better than literally anything else Marvel has put out in a long time. It's actually stunning how good that movie looks. So I do think that one of James Gunn's biggest strengths is just his ability to plan and know like what he's gonna film and be able to prepare for that in order to like optimize how good his movies can look. Because I like you simply can't ignore how much better Guardians 3 looks than a lot of recent Marvel output. So I definitely trust James Gunn, and I think it's good to hear him say that just because everybody else is using the volume doesn't mean that I'm inherently going to use it. So I think that's cool. All right, next up, let's get into this Insomniac leaks. So if you don't know, Insomniac Games, that's the developer that they've made the past 3 Spider-Man games with Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Marvel Spider-Man 2. The developer has been hacked, and a bunch of information has come out, and I'm not going to get into all of it. There's been personal information from the developers that I wouldn't even know where to look. Even if I knew where to look, I wouldn't look into it because that's fucked up. So my condolences to everybody that got their information taken. And it's like serious stuff like tax information and passports and just like why like why would anybody even want any of that? Well, obviously we know why, but still. And there's also just a bunch of like story stuff from what I understand. There's like gameplay builds that have been released, like cutscenes from like Wolverine that I just have no interest in looking at, quite frankly, because believe it or not, I am a fan of this stuff too. And so I don't really want to know what's in Marvel's Wolverine. So I want to talk about, but when it comes to leaks and what I choose to cover, I will talk about just general like stuff that's being worked on, right? Like news that isn't spoilery. And while yes, it sucks that this stuff got revealed before Insomniac would have wanted to reveal it, it is news that is out there, and I was like, I'm not gonna just not talk about it because we found it out through unscrupulous means. So I figured I'd just lay out how I like to cover leaks, just because it has been a topic of conversation. But yeah, let's get into some of it. So to be clear, I'm going to be talking about some games that are probably going to be worked on. So if you consider that a spoiler, I guess move on to the next topics. Yeah, let's move on. Of particular interest to gamers who are fans of the X-Men is a publishing agreement between Marvel and Sony Interactive Entertainment. The document lists 3 upcoming X-Men games to be published under the agreement, the first being Wolverine and the rest as yet unnamed. Wolverine is to be published no later than September 1st of 2025, while the other 2 are to come before December 31st, 2029, and December 31st, 2033. So, yeah, one of the big things that came out in the leak is just that Sony has signed publishing agreements with Marvel to do 2 other X-Men games aside from Wolverine. I guess this isn't too surprising. Like, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if this is just Wolverine 2 and Wolverine 3, right? Like, you just, whenever you're making things, you generally want to do a trilogy. So I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be surprised if this is just Wolverine 2 and 3. But I also wouldn't be surprised if maybe they're wanting to do like an X-Men, or kind of what they've done with Spider-Man, where you start off with Peter, and then you introduce Miles, and spoiler alert, I guess, for Spider-Man 2, they tease Silk in that game, so presumably we're going to be able to play as her in an upcoming Spider-Man game. And well, there's actually some news that might speak to that later, but anyways, yeah, so like maybe this does lead into like X-Men games, right? Where maybe we get a Wolverine 2 where you get to play as some other X-Men, and maybe by the time they do the 3rd game, it's just an X-Men game. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised by that. However, I will say that I think the advantage with Spider-Man is that they all kind of have the same move set. Obviously, with X-Men, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. Like, Wolverine probably shouldn't play as Cyclops, who probably shouldn't play as Storm, who probably shouldn't play as Toad. So yeah, we don't know what the X-Men games are, but it's probable that it's probably just a Wolverine trilogy. All right, now let's get into some Spider-Man shenanigans, because it seems weird what Sony is seemingly planning for the franchise. So let's just read into it. It's coming from Tech for Gamers. Part 1 and Part 2 will each retail for $49.99. By the way, yes, that is saying that it seems like they want to split Part 3 into Parts 1 and 2, and be released a year apart, with Part 1 coming out in holiday 2027 and Part 2 in holiday 2028. Day and date with the first part, a multiplayer standalone game, will debut at $49.99. In addition, a combo including all 3 games is expected to arrive in 2029 for a price of $59.99. So, from what I understand, and also I guess I should actually clarify, when it comes to the Insomniac leaks, I actually haven't looked into it that deeply. Like, this is just stuff that I've come across and been like, well, I guess I know about this now. I might as well talk about it. So just to be clear, these stories are not as well researched as I guess I normally would research stories. But I say all this to say that from what I understand, this all comes from a leaked image that just sort of lays out the plan for Spider-Man 3. So I say all this to say that this isn't necessarily like confirmed that they're doing this, because this very well could just be an image that one guy used to pitch to like the Sony upper management, and hopefully Sony upper management looked at this and was like, that's ridiculous, we're not going to do that, because it really would be ridiculous. I mean, like, first of all, to launch Spider-Man 3 Part 1 for $40, actually, it was $50, right? Yeah, for $50, and then to also launch a multiplayer game for another $50 on the same day would be ridiculous. I mean, I don't like that would just be insane. Like, obviously that would be way too expensive. You would have two Spider-Man games competing with each other, which makes no sense. Even though one of them is single player, one of them is multiplayer, they're still competing with each other. I just don't see them doing that. And then to just like, now I will say, as far as them splitting it up into 2 parts, I don't know that that's necessarily the most ridiculous thing in the world. Like, especially if it's like part 1 is like a full 30-hour game and part 2 is a full 30-hour game. I mean, I don't know that splitting them up into 2 parts is the most ridiculous thing in the world. I know that people think that the Spider-Man games are kind of short anyways. I personally disagree with that. I disagree with the idea that 30 hours is inherently too short for something. Because if it's paced well, like 30 hours can be perfectly fine, right? Like Spider-Man 1 was paced perfectly fine. I thought Miles Morales was paced perfectly fine. I do think that Spider-Man 2 felt a little bit overstuffed without enough time to develop everything. So on that front, and especially if Spider-Man 3 runs into those same issues and part 1 feels underwhelming, that could be one thing. But I guess all I'm saying is that I don't think that this is a bad idea inherently. Because, yeah, if it's like a full experience for $50 and then they give you another full experience for $50, I think that honestly isn't the worst thing in the world. And technically, they would be selling the games like for less than what we currently pay for most AAA games, which is $70. But then of course, there's that. Obviously, people would feel shortchanged because if like a year later they put out all 3 of these games for $60, that might feel a little cheap. I mean, obviously you're paying to be like the first to experience these things first with everybody else, but that might feel a little cheap if you just sell everything in one package. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I can't see them doing this. It seems too confusing. Why would you have 2 Spider-Man games competing with each other on the same day? It seems ridiculous. So my guess is this just isn't going to happen. And this was just maybe something that somebody was like, hey guys, what if we did this? And hopefully he was slapped out of the room. Not actually slapped, because I don't condone violence personally. So yeah, we'll see though. We'll see. Maybe it does come out. Okay. Next up, let's talk about Young Avengers. So this is a rumor that came out, and now I feel like I'm clarifying my methods in this episode, but this is something that has come from one of those like internet scooper guys, which is just like a random anonymous like Twitter account that has garnered a reputation for having scoops. Now, normally I tend to just ignore those kinds of accounts because it's just like I'll wait until it's actually confirmed by the studio, or I'll wait for like one of the major trades like Deadline and the Hollywood Reporter to report on stuff, because that's really when you know that something is true for sure. So that's just to say that I normally wouldn't cover this, but we really don't have that many topics today. So I was like, fuck it, we'll talk about it. Because at the end of the day, Young Avengers, it was teased at the end of the Marvels, so it's not like obviously, so I can still talk about whether or not Young Avengers is a good idea on its own. And it's a conversation that is initiated by one of these random scooper guys. So anyways, enough of that. Let's just actually read the story. So this is coming from comicbookmovie.com. According to insider Daniel Richtman, Marvel is indeed developing Young Avengers, but as a movie. It sounds like a series was the original plan, but it's said that going forward, Kevin Feige would rather showcase significant events in theatrical settings. Okay, so first of all, is Young Avengers even a good idea? In my opinion, not necessarily. I think the first thing that they should do is not call the movie Young Avengers. I think it's kind of silly. I mean, like, it makes sense in the comic books that characters can stay in like static ages and they just don't have to age. So you can have like a Young Avengers, you could have a Teen Titans, but when we're in live action, Amon Vellani is like 20. Haley Steinfeld is like 26. I don't know how old Jatil Gomez, the girl who played America Chavez, it's like, I don't know how old she is, but she's not going to stay a teenager for long. So it's like by the time this movie comes out, you're gonna have a bunch of characters in your that are full on adults. Uh, it's just uh, you don't need to call it Young Avengers because at the end of the day, calling it Young Avengers inherently is just going to devalue the brand because people are gonna look at it and be like, oh, that's just a throwaway team. That's not the real Avengers. That's just the Young Avengers. This is this thing that they're doing to appeal to kids. If you call it just Avengers, you just make it an Avengers movie. That's inherently going to make people more interested in it. By the time you get around to filming this, most of your cast are going to be adults, like well into adulthood. You can just treat them like real characters, like real superheroes, and just call it an Avengers movie. Because I've been saying this for a long time as well, is that Marvel really should just make a fucking Avengers movie. Like, the Avengers movies don't have to be these massive, large scale, with Infinity War and Endgame, they were universal threats. And now with King Dynasty, or not no longer, Avengers 5 and Secret Wars, it's like the multiversal threats that we're dealing with. It's like, you could just make a simple Avengers movie where they're just focused on saving the Earth. You could still do that. It doesn't have to make $2.8 billion. You can, because the other thing as well is that when we're just talking about how the MCU has fallen in general, when did the MCU really become the MCU that we know it to be today? It was with that first Avengers movie. When Iron Man and Captain America became like the faces of the MCU, it was during that first Avengers movie. And I think one of the big problems is that like the new characters that they've built up, they're not going to automatically become they're not going to automatically become the next Tony Stark. They're not going to automatically become the next Captain America. It's like, first of all, you have to put them in good projects. Like, their individual projects have to be good, which a lot of them have struggled, to be fair. So that's one issue. But the other issue is that you got to put them in an Avengers movie. Like, they have to interact with each other. They have to develop bonds. They have to develop rivalries like we saw in the first Avengers movie. It's like, yeah, you kind of got to do that. And so we really should just have an Avengers movie with Amon Villani and Captain America and when I say Captain America, I mean the Anthony Mackie Captain America and Shang-Chi and Kate Bishop and like all of these characters. It's like, because the problem is that the Avengers 5 and Avengers Secret Wars, those movies are presumably going to be like incredibly overstuffed because there's rumors of them bringing back the original Avengers. They're going to bring in like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and Hugh Jackman and probably Patrick Stewart and Halle Berry, and they're going to try to bring in all the nostalgia bait. And it's like, if you're trying to build up your new core cast of characters, they're gonna get drowned out in a big multiversal movie. So that's why when I hear these the idea of a Young Avengers, that's not an inherently a bad thing in my opinion. I know people are saying that it's going to be dead on arrival and it's like, listen. Obviously, yes, the projects that these characters have been in has struggled, right? We have Amon Villani here. Her movie The Marvels just bombed. But the other thing I want to keep in mind as well is that when we talk about these Avengers movies, the first Avengers movie made quadruple the box office of like all of the MCU movies that came before it individually. I mean, like, like the Iron Man movies were the most successful, where I think Iron Man 1 made like 500 million and Iron Man 2 made like 600 million. But when you look at the Incredible Hulk and Thor and Captain America, those movies like maybe cracked 400 million. One of them might have cracked 400 million. And then they made the Avengers, bada bing, bada boom. That thing made like $1.5 billion. So I should just stress as well that if you can properly build up hype for the movie, people like the Avengers movies prove that people will show up for it. Like it can be successful. And even with that, probably shouldn't spend $250 million on it. You know what I'm saying? Maybe don't do that. Maybe don't spend $250 million. Maybe find some way to just make these movies without throwing, without it needing to make $1 billion in order for it to break even. So I don't know. I know I'm throwing a lot at this, and I kind of just used this as just like as an excuse to talk about how Marvel really should just make a normal Avengers movie to actually build up these characters. And yeah, that's the thing. Like Young Avengers, just building up a core cast of your younger, I guess, heroes isn't necessarily a bad idea. But just call it an Avengers movie and don't treat them like children. Just treat them like actual heroes if you want to actually present them as such. And if you want these characters to be the next Tony Stark and Captain America, don't treat them like children because they're not even children. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop ranting. All right, yeah, let's just move on to the next story. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. We got some new pics from the Avatar Netflix show, so we'll just go through them. This is the grandma from the first few episodes, I think. She looks like an old lady, so looks good as far as I'm concerned. Here we have Suki, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember who the lady is on the right. I'm trying to remember if there was a lady who was a prominent character in like the episode where they go to the island where Suki is at. I don't remember. I'm sorry. But that's obviously Suki. She looks good, I guess. This is, I want to say, this is like the engineer guy from that one episode where they go to one of the air temples, and there's like a community there that have taken over the air temple. So I think that's that guy. So he looks good as well. Then this is Jet, I would assume. It's not Zuko. I'm pretty sure this is just Jet, and he looks like a cool guy, I guess. So sure, he looks good. This is the Hunter lady. You can tell by her tattoo. She looks good. I don't need to get into that too much, but she looks good. I guess that's what I'll say. Ooh. How old is she supposed? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not even gonna get into that. Okay, so here's Aang. So people were looking at the creature in the back, and people were like, "Is that Appa?" The face looks weird, and the face does look weird, but I don't think that's Appa. Other people have been saying this, and I'm inclined to agree with those people that this is probably like one of the spirits that appear in the show. Like, remember that one episode where I think like the village gets kidnapped or something, and there's like a big panda that Aang has to negotiate with or something. Pretty sure it's one of those like spirit creatures that are in like the Avatar universe. Yeah, I don't think that's Appa, because it looks like he's sitting, right? And it looks like he has like an arm and like legs. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's really blurry, and we could be wrong, but I don't think it is. But I mean, listen. The show looks good. I mean, I don't know. I like set design, costume design. It all looks like Avatar, I think. Obviously, like when I say it looks like Avatar, it looks like a more mature tone. Looks like a more serious toned Avatar. But I think that could work. So yeah, we'll see. Obviously, the trailer was compelling. So. But that's it for our news stories today. Now I will be getting into what I've been watching, so let's get into that. All right, so I watched the first 2 episodes of Percy Jackson, and I gotta say, kind of disappointed with the show. It's just not as good as I want a Percy Jackson adaptation to be. I mean, I will say it is more accurate to the source material so far. I think the main thing from the movie that I think they got that they changed was that Clarice wasn't in the movie, I don't think, and Clarice plays her part in the show. And the show does change a couple things, like Gabe, for example, is like a lot more toned down in the show. Like he's kind of a pushover in this one. Like he's kind of a loser in this one. I mean, not that he wasn't a loser in the books, but it's like in the show he's not as like abusive, I guess, as he was in the books, and he's not even drinking alcohol. He's drinking like a Diet Coke in the show, whereas in the books he was a full on alcoholic, and he was like gambling. He's not gambling. Well, he's like, okay, never mind. He is gambling in the show as well, but he's like at a poker table or whatever. He's like, make me some food, Percy's mom, and she's like, yes, honey, I'll make you food as long as you don't beat us or whatever. It's just like a lot more intense in the book. So there are little changes like that, which is fine. I mean, this is a Disney Plus show. I understand that maybe they don't want to go as hard into that stuff, but yeah, overall it's a lot more accurate. But even still, it just doesn't have the sauce. Like, I'll just say that some of the pacing, like the pacing is very quick in these first two episodes, and maybe some of these moments could have been allowed to breathe a little better. I'll say that acting isn't as strong as I'd like it to be. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we like kids, but some of these performances just aren't as strong as like Logan Lerman and whatever faces the actress who played Annabeth and Grover. At least from what I remember. Maybe I'd go back and I'd be like, these performances are ass too, but like Walker Scoble and I don't know the actresses for Annabeth and Grover, like it's not quite strong. And even like some of the side characters like Luke, I don't know that the actor for Luke is like really nailing it either. So yeah, it's kind of what I feared, where it's like, yeah, this feels like a Disney Plus show. And that comes with all of the negative connotations that kind of come with being a Disney Plus show. Where it just doesn't have the sauce. It doesn't have that, yeah, this is like must-watch television. Which I do feel like Percy Jackson has it has the potential of being. But that being said, I don't hate it. Like, I'm obviously going to watch it, because I'm a diehard Percy Jackson fan. So I'm going to watch it, and I'm not hating it so far, but I do wonder if, I don't think that this is something that is going to capture the attention of, like, normal people that aren't already bought into the material. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it gets better. Next up, I also watched the first two episodes of What If Season 2, and it's good so far. I don't love it, but so far, I guess I would say it's slight improvement over Season 1, in the sense that I think my biggest problem with Season 1 of What If was just that these episodes don't have like enough time to really like to tell a meaningful story that they're trying to tell. And these two episodes do also kind of have that same that same problem, but not to the same extent, right? Like, it's not like the Captain Carter episode in Season 1 where they just shrunk Captain America the First Avenger into 22 minutes and it was just rushed and the pacing was terrible. These two episodes could be better if it was like a movie and these plot threads had more time to marinate, but even still, I enjoyed these first two episodes. So the first one was like, what if Nebula joined the Nova Corps? And I thought this one was cool. Nebula was like a hard-boiled detective sort of character, and she has to like solve the death of a character that I guess I won't spoil. She has to solve the mystery. And I thought it was cool. That being said, it doesn't like in the second half. So it's weird because the first half of the episode is like super serious and dark, and I'm like, oh, this is a cool tone for this episode. And then in the second half, it just like goes into more jokey MCU tone. And it was just kind of weird. It was like, that's not consistent. So that was just strange as to why they decided to do that. So instead of just keeping with the tone that you had established, but okay, like it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And then get into the second episode, and it's basically what if Star-Lord, it's what if Yondu gave Star-Lord as a child to his dad. So you have you basically have Ego, the Living Planet, and Star-Lord coming to take over Earth in like the 80s. And so the Avengers of the 80s, what would be the Avengers of the 80s, they come in and have to stop them. And it was a cool premise. And it was pretty solid execution. This is definitely an episode that didn't even start off with a serious tone. It's very much in the the standard Marvel tones with quips and stuff, but you had like Hank Pym in there as a young man, and he's Ant-Man. You also weirdly have like the what I assume is the Lawrence Fishburne character from Ant-Man and the Wasp as a young man, also in like an Ant-Man suit. And then you had like I don't know who was that character. There was like a Captain Marvel-esque character, but she wasn't really Captain Marvel-like character. She was like a Kree person. I don't even know what that was. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know who that person was. But you also have like the Black Panther, who I guess would be. I think it was just supposed to be T'Challa's dad. And who was the other? Oh, and then you also have Bucky showed up. But which makes sense. He was like sent by the Russian government to work with the Americans. There's another one that I feel like I'm missing. Oh, Thor showed up as well, and that's just like fun because it's like, oh yeah, Thor would be around, and he would be fighting against Ego if Ego was consuming the 9 realms and whatever. I feel like I'm missing an Avenger. Whatever. Maybe it'll come to me. But yeah, it's a fun concept. Fun execution. I enjoyed the episode. But again, I do think both of these do kind of suffer from like, these would be better if they were full-length movies. And if they just had more time to develop the plot. I still think that really I still think that the episodes of season 1 where it was like the Doctor Strange episode, as well as I would even argue like the episode where like Hank Pym just killed all the Avengers, I still think that those two are like the best examples of what if can be. Like those 2 episodes are like genuinely excellent. These are good though. I don't mind them at all. All right. Last thing we're talking about today, I watched Aquaman 2. The end of the DCEU. We've lived to tell the tale of a universe that is now dead. So how does it end? Does it end with a triumph or with a whimpering fart? Well, it's not very good. Doesn't feel like the end of the saga. That, in its defense, though, it was never really intended to be. This was a decision that was made after the movie was made, I want to say. So I mean, I guess you can't really blame the movie for not like addressing the fact that it's the final movie in the DCEU. But I mean, honestly, it just feels like more of the first movie, which I also didn't really like. It's just really goofy and silly, and the special effects are bad. The narrative is not compelling in the least. It's not the worst thing in the world. Like, I didn't like hate it, and there are moments where like I was enjoying myself. Like whenever the movie centers on Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson, there are actually like nuggets of enjoyment to be found. There's like a middle portion of the movie where it's like a bromance movie between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson. And I feel like if the movie got to that sooner and leaned into it a bit more in the third act, I feel like that could have been, you could have had something here, because they do have good chemistry in parts. I think you could have leaned into that. But too much of the movie is just focused on like Atlantis, which I don't care about, like politics of Atlantis, which I don't care about, and the villain and his motivations, which I don't care about, and bad CGI. It just doesn't really work. So definitely a lackluster ending for the DCEU, but hopefully the DCU's better. Hopefully James Gunn is cooking. Hopefully he's at the stove. Hopefully he's chopped up all the ingredients. Hopefully he's ready to put it all together and potentially save the comic book movie genre. Because, I mean, listen, if the MCU just continues to fall and Superman Legacy comes out and it's a dud, we very well could be looking at just the beginning of the end. And what is this channel going to be? I don't know about anything else. I don't know. I guess I could just talk about whatever the popular genre is. I'll be talking about video game movies, maybe. Hopefully not, though, because I don't know that I really. I don't need the Mario stuff like the Mario movie to become the preeminent genre of entertainment. Or I mean, I guess I should say, hopefully those get better. But anyways, that's gonna be it for this episode of Nerdy Movie News Roundup. Let me know what you think about any and all of the topics that we talked about today. Like the video if you liked it. Dislike it if you disliked it. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.